Evening, we are coming on the air with breaking news from the White House. Any moment now, President Trump is set to address the nation after he said the United States bombed multiple nuclear sites inside Iran earlier this evening. This attack is historic, marking the first time the U.S. has ever conducted a direct military attack on Iran and escalating the conflict between Iran and Israel. Take a look at the map. You see those 3 points there, right in the center of the country almost? Those were the 3 sites the United States attacked. The President of the United States telling our own Kristen Welker that the attack was extremely successful. A complete and total success is how President Trump told our Kristen Welker. According to multiple White House officials, NBC News has also learned that the president set to say that he is not planning any additional strikes on Iran. But I want to show you those words that the president has just released about an hour plus ago. But Kristen Welker spoke to the president. I want to go right to Kristen Welker, the moderator of Meet the Press. Kristen, what did he have to tell you?
Jose, as you said, President Trump clearly emboldened in the wake of these strikes, hailing them as a complete success, a total success, and a great success. So that, I think, will be the tone that we can anticipate hearing from President Trump when he addresses the nation just moments from now. This is a turning point for President Trump, who campaigned on an America First foreign policy going back to 2016, 2020, 2024, arguing that he wanted to keep America out of foreign entanglements. This is a step toward ensnaring the United States in the Middle East conflict. President Trump had said that he was going to give diplomacy with Iran a chance. For months, the Trump administration had been talking to Iran, the president saying he would give them an additional 2 weeks, clearly coming to this conclusion after deciding that wouldn't work, Jose.
And Kristen, here's the president.
Very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Razencane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President of the United States wrapping up his words right now. We're back with our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, one of the very striking sentences that the president said tonight, there will be peace or there will be tragedy for Iran.
That's right, Jose. He said there will be peace or there will be tragedy that is far greater for Iran. I was struck by a couple of things he said here, and I was told in advance by multiple White House officials that the president was hoping these strikes and would communicate his hope that these strikes would help prompt Iran to come back to the negotiating table. The president said if there is not peace here forward, that future attacks would be far greater and, as he described it, a lot easier. But let's pull back the curtain for a little bit. The president only a matter of days ago said he would take up to 2 weeks to make a decision about whether or not the U.S. would intervene in Israel's war with Iran. Clearly, the president either had his mind made up when he made that announcement or made it up very quickly. It did certainly give him, in the eyes of some national security experts, a bit of breathing room where perhaps Iran had backed off any expectation that a strike of this kind would take place. So the president, we have now heard, with B-2 bombers that only the United States has, and with 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs, again, bombs that only the United States has, in his words, totally obliterated the nuclear sites, 3 of them across Iran. Specifically, he said the objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear capability. He describes today's effort as a spectacular success. Jose, I've had an opportunity to speak to others who were in this cabinet room, I should say the Situation Room, with President Trump here at the White House as he was monitoring what took place tonight. The Attorney General Pam Bondi among those of whom were in the room, part of his national security team. She, in a text message, tells me this is a, quote, great day for our world's safety. But as we speak about this day, which is certainly historic, the real question now is about what we should expect in the days ahead. And the real concern, certainly in the eyes of those here at the White House and across the American national security community, is what retaliation is coming next from Iran. Certainly nobody expects Iran to slip away into the night quietly here. And the expectation is, even if Iran is not to retaliate, that certainly its proxies would be inclined to do so, with a series of potential targets across that region, including U.S. interests and assets like American bases there, and beyond that, American troops, tens of thousands who serve throughout that region. Jose?
Peter Alexander, thank you very much. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. He is in Tel Aviv. Richard, you that so well know the region, the words that President Trump utilized tonight, backed up by what he called an extremely successful military mission in Iran, and then the words by the Prime Minister of Israel just moments before the President of the United States, there's a very consistent, strong message to the rest of the world.
It seems like Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump coordinated their messages. They were both effectively saying the same thing. Shortly before President Trump spoke, Prime Minister Netanyahu released a statement in English talking about this operation, confirming that it had taken place. And he thanked President Trump profusely, mentioning President Trump's name repeatedly from the start, in the middle, at the end of the speech, saying that the United States has done something historic. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, like President Trump just did, was framing this operation as one designed to bring more peace in the Middle East. He said there is peace through strength, but strength comes first, and then comes the peace. And you were just talking a short while ago with Peter Alexander, and President Trump has framed this as he was describing, that hoping that these attacks would convince Iran to, quote, come back to the negotiating table. Iran is at the negotiating table. Iran has always been at the negotiating table. Iran's foreign minister just did an interview with our Andrea Mitchell, talking about the need to negotiate and how Iranians feel that they have been manipulated in this negotiation process, that it has been a bait and switch, that they have tried to negotiate, and the more they engage in the negotiations, the more they find themselves under attack and caught off guard. So does this lead to more negotiations? From Iran's perspective, the negotiations have only lured them into a trap. But what choice do they have at this stage? Do they go all out and risk their end of their regime, or do they try and enter into some kind of humiliating, from their point of view, agreement? So very difficult decisions coming out of Iran. So far, we've been hearing messages of defiance on Iranian state TV. Their main message has been that this attack was not as successful as President Trump is framing it, saying that the materials were moved out. They didn't specify exactly what, but that the materials had already been evacuated from those 3 sites that President Trump said were just obliterated by American military power.
And I want to bring in NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube. Courtney, what are the steps going forward for the United States to be able to determine how effectively they did indeed obliterate these 3 sites, as the president claims?
Yeah, that was something I was really struck by. The term completely and totally obliterated is how President Trump characterized all 3 of those sites. Now, first off, the U.S. is going to have to wait until daylight in Iran, which is coming up pretty soon, to be able just to see. I'm sure that there will be satellite images. I'm sure that there will be, frankly, social media images that will pop up to show exactly what have happened there. But the reality is the best way for anyone to determine exactly what the real battle damage assessment is to have people on the ground. Jose, I cannot envision any scenario in which that involve U.S. military or U.S. personnel in any real way. But I suspect that's what they would really need to have a real, complete, confident assessment that, in fact, the facilities have all been completely and totally obliterated.
And the Pentagon has been for some time now sending many resources, both the ones that we can see and the ones that we probably can't, to the region. What are some of those sources and resources going to play a part of in protecting U.S. assets and interests in the region?
Yeah, so we've already seen some of them play out, and I suspect that they are only on an even higher heightened state of alert. I don't know how they can go any higher than they have been, frankly. But the U.S. has moved in ground-based interceptors in recent months. That's THAAD and Patriots that have been used, frankly, to help Israel defend itself against some of these Iranian attacks over the last recent days. But the U.S. has also moved in additional ships. Some of those have ballistic missile defenses. They have the ability to shoot down an incoming ballistic missile or other projectiles that are coming at, whether it's U.S. installations, at the ships themselves, or even at land, something like if in fact Iran is trying to target Israel here. But the U.S. also has brought in additional air assets, so jets. They can put those up, they can shoot down drones, missiles, whatever it is that's coming at them. Jose, the big question is any concern about attacks from some of these smaller groups. So we're not talking about necessarily just ballistic missiles flying from Iran. A lot of that capability has actually been taken out in recent days. The bigger concern right now is these proxy networks that are there in the region. They aren't always firing off large-scale missiles and things. They attack bases with rockets, with mortars, but they can be very deadly in their efforts. And if they try to overwhelm some of these bases and these base defenses, that could pose a real problem for U.S. personnel in the region. That is something that we need to be watching. I would really be fixed on the bases in Iraq and Syria, because there are a number of these proxy networks there. They've been essentially lying kind of dormant in recent months, but they have shown in recent years the ability to really threaten U.S. bases and even cause injury and death to U.S. personnel and service members in the region, Jose.
These are very delicate moments. Courtney Kube, thank you so very much. I want to bring in the moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, who spoke with the president just a short time ago, right before he spoke to the nation. Kristen, what did he tell you, and what have officials on Capitol Hill been saying?
Well, President Trump was extremely emboldened. He called this a great success, a complete and total success. And you heard him really reiterate that in his address to the nation, Jose. And as we watch and wait to see what Iran's next steps will be, I do think the debate on Capitol Hill will be the next place where we will be looking. Already, you have some Democrats and Republicans saying that Congress should have signed off on this first. Senator Tim Kaine, for example, Massey has come out, a Republican from Kentucky, and said that Congress needs to sign off on military action first. Having said that, a number of Republicans and even some Democrats are praising the president's actions tonight, saying this was targeted. This was necessary to stop Iran and its nuclear program. That's where this debate is going to go. What, if any, congressional oversight should there be? Remember, Congress did vote on the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War. And so undoubtedly, I think you will start to see some of those arguments come to the forefront as we watch and wait to see what happens next. And I've been talking to lawmakers on Capitol Hill. There is a general sense, Jose, those who are supportive, those who are concerned about this actions. What will happen next? What, if anything, will the retaliation from Iran look like? And then what might that mean for the United States? President Trump earlier this week was pressed on whether this could ever involve U.S. boots on the ground. He indicated no, that was not something that he would be willing to green light. But again, if this situation continues to escalate, Jose, the real concern is, could this ensnare the United States more deeply into a foreign conflict? And of course, what's so extraordinary hanging over all of this is a president who campaigned on a promise to get Americans out of foreign wars. This very conflict has really divided the MAGA base. Steve Bannon, one of his closest allies, urging the president not to take this action, concerned that it could be another Iraq, which of course ensnared the United States for over a decade, costing thousands of American lives. And so the debate on Capitol Hill, the debate within the president's base will continue, I think, to unfold as we continue to watch and wait and see what happens next, Jose.
And of course, all of this explained and debated and spoken at Meet the Press, only on NBC tomorrow, Sunday. Thank you, Kristen Welker. I want to bring in our senior Washington correspondent and the anchor of NBC Nightly News Sunday, Hallie Jackson. She is with us on the phone. Hallie, we're speaking with Kristen about the repercussions and the concerns on Capitol Hill and really throughout the country here as to what happened so far away, but the concerns that maybe that will have an impact on us here. What are you hearing?
Yeah, politically and domestically, Jose. So a couple of things here to the point that you and Kristen and others are discussing here. And this question over authorization and the president's ability to initiate a strike, an airstrike like the one that we have seen tonight in Iran. So remember, back when he struck and essentially took out Soleimani, which you heard the president reference in his remarks just in the last couple of minutes, his administration suggested that they were basing that on Article 2 of the Constitution. You've heard the discussion around the War Powers Act. You've heard discussion, including from a couple of Republicans, I would say a small minority of Republicans, about the constitutionality of a strike like this. This is a president who has previously leaned on other authorizations. The authorization for the use of military force had come up back during that strike, although the administration did not heavily rely on that at the time. So I imagine when you have Speaker Mike Johnson, for example, late tonight suggesting that the United States was in quote unquote imminent danger, that is where this is heading as it relates to the authorization question. The other piece of this, of course, domestic domestically and politically is the American response. And by that, I mean voters. We've already seen polling in recent days as this conflict has intensified between Israel and Iran, suggesting that more Americans disapprove of the U.S. getting involved in the Middle East, getting involved in a region that has ensnared the U.S. previously for many years in largely unpopular or wars that became unpopular, conflicts that became unpopular. So I think when you see the president talk about this being essentially a targeted strike, that perhaps speaks to the appetite of the American public of getting involved in something like this. At the same time, you also heard the president pledge to strike again, if need be, if in fact there wasn't peace, as he put it. He suggested there would be that quote unquote greater tragedy that could in fact unfold here. Remember, Iran has already suggested that if something like what happened tonight were to happen, they would retaliate against U.S. bases in the region. Courtney, others have spoken about the military capabilities of Iran to do something like that. But I think that retaliation question, Jose, is another one that we have to watch in the days to come, especially as the world is laser focused on this particular moment tonight, Jose.
Ellie Jackson with extraordinary coverage, and of course much more tomorrow on NBC Nightly News Sunday, the program that Hallie Jackson anchors every Sunday. I want to bring in Jeremy Bash. He is a former chief of staff at the CIA and the Pentagon. And Jeremy, one of the things, among the things that struck me from the president's comments tonight are just how clear he was that this, he hoped, would be done and over with, and that there now must be peace, but that the United States is certainly ready to step it back up if need be. What did you hear in those words?
Well, I think when the president was presented with military options for conducting strikes against Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities, he was probably presented with an option that was focused on Fordo alone, because that's the facility that only the United States could have undertaken an operation against, because as we've been talking about for many days here, only the United States has that massive ordnance penetrator, that 30,000 bunker busting bomb that can be carried on a B-2. But instead, I think, of going kind of small or narrow, not that that would be small or narrow, but it's kind of in the range of options, he went big. I mean, he went to the option presented to him that would authorize precision strikes on 3 different facilities, including apparently from reports that came from not just U.S. aircraft, but also U.S. naval vessels firing Tomahawk cruise missiles at Esfahan and Natanz. And so he really tried to, in one blow, set back the Iranian nuclear project by several years. Now, again, you can't bomb away know-how. If Iranian scientists and military leaders have developed the know-how of how to enrich uranium, how to store it, how to process it, and how to build a nuclear weapon, they can reconstitute this. They can rebuild this. And essentially, the president of the United States is going to be faced with the question in the future of, well, what if we discover they're working on another project or another facility? Should we bomb that as well? And I think what he's telegraphing is we're prepared to do that. We're prepared to go after these facilities unless Iran decides at the negotiating table that they're willing to give up for all time the right to enrich domestically. And that was really kind of the heart of the Obama-Iran deal, which was there would be intrusive inspections, there would be oversight, there would be international verification of what Iran was doing, but Iran was allowed to have enrichment for domestic energy, civilian energy purposes. And I think kind of the Trump calculus here in these early months of his presidency was we just can't trust Iran at all. We can't trust them to have even a proclaimed civilian nuclear capacity. We believe that they are in possession of enough uranium to build several bombs worth if they were to further enrich that uranium. Maybe there's additional information that they have worked more on the weaponization aspect of the nuclear weapons program. Again, that remains to be seen. The public has not been presented with such information, though there have been some press reports. And we do know that Iran has been working on and perfecting its ballistic missile programs because they've been firing several hundred of those at Israel, both last April, last October, and again this month. And so I think the president basically decided, look, if we've got one shot, let's not waste the crisis. Let's go big. And it appears that that's what he's done tonight.
And Jeremy, just you with your deep experience and understanding, as you are a student of this, as well as a participant over the years in so many aspects of it. But since 1979, the Iranian regime has been very clearly opposed to Israel and considers the United States the great Satan, the big enemy. And as early as 1979, when we had 444 days of 60 Americans and supporters taken in the American embassy in Iran for 444 days, and then 1983, the Beirut barracks explosion that killed 241 of Marines, patriots, there has been a pattern in the Iranian regime as of 1979, to be willing to have talks ad nauseum, but very little results. Why you think, Jeremy, it was the president's decision to act now?
Well, I think several factors kind of conspired to present this narrow window of opportunity for the president to ask. But the main one is that Iran decided to join the post-October 7th war against Israel. So after Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th, 2023, and of course there have been links between Iran and Hamas, but then on October 8th, something happened, which was that Iran, which is a sponsor of Hezbollah, the terrorist army operating out of Lebanon, Hezbollah joined the fight, attacking Israel's north. And so Iran effectively joined the fight directly against Israel. And then after Israel attacked some Iranian Quds Force commanders operating out of Syria in April of 2024, Iran fired ballistic missiles directly at Israel. And that kind of crossed a big red line. Israel responded. There was a back and forth. Then Iran again in October 1st of 2024, attacked Israel with ballistic missiles. And Israel's response there was very important, and I think historians will note it. October 24th, 2024, Israel took out Iran's ballistic missiles, its ballistic missile production capabilities, but more importantly, its air defenses. And once Iran lost its air defenses and then had lost Hezbollah after Israel took out the Hezbollah leadership, and Iran's Iran's proxy or partner in the region, Syria, fell, the Bashar Assad regime fell, then essentially you had a very weakened Iran that had no terrorist military that could take on Israel. And Israel had kind of a clear shot, clear skies, clear flying lanes over Syria to go right after Iran. And Iran had no air defenses. And so the United States is looking at this situation saying, hey, we've got Iran, as you pointed out, that has been our sworn adversary since 1979. They've attacked our forces. They attacked the Marine barracks in the 80s. They've attacked our forces all around the Gulf. There are Houthi elements. Their Houthi proxies have attacked U.S. naval ships. They're the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. They're building a nuclear facility, a capability. They say not to build a nuclear weapon, but they also have part of their enrichment facility buried deep underground in a bunker. It's too small for any civilian use. And I think Trump is looking and saying, they've got no air defenses. Their ballistic missile situation is totally compromised. This is the time, if ever there were one, to basically put a gun to the head of the Iranian regime and say, if you don't give up domestic enrichment, we're going to shoot. And I think that's exactly what happened. Trump said to them, this is what I demand. The Iranian regime said, no, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in giving up domestic enrichment of uranium. And Trump saw the way the first week and one day have been going for Israel in this war, where Israel has had total air dominance and has personnel on the ground and has been taking out Iranian Quds Force and military leaders. And Israel's basically been operating with impunity in Iran. And I think the United States, under President Trump, said, we should act now because this may be our last best chance to get at Fordo, get at Natanz, get at Esfahan, and have minimal impact to U.S. forces. Of course, that's kind of the day one calculus. I think what analysts have been talking about all evening, and we're going to be talking about for the next several weeks and months, is what next? What happens now? Will Iran attack U.S. forces in the region? Will Iran unleash terrorism? Will Iran bury its nuclear program deeper underground, make it harder to get at? Will they kind of lick their chops, take their time, and go back, and will we be here 2, 3, 4 years from now with Iran having a much more capable nuclear capacity? That's really hard to know, and it's going to require a vigilance by the international community, by the United States, by our key allies and partners to make sure that Iran does not kind of move out of this phase and develop the nuclear weapon that we so desperately don't want them to have.
Jeremy Bash, thank you so very much. I want to go back to our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, many concerns, many questions tonight out of the White House, and we were seeing these pictures from the Situation Room where the president, along with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chief of Staff, as well as the foreign minister, I should say, but it's really the Secretary of State of the United States. In the moments previous to and during this mission, what more can we expect out of the White House?
Well, we do know what's going to be interesting is that President Trump is scheduled to leave early next week for NATO, where he will come face to face with some of America's European allies. So this will obviously be at the top of that conversation. It comes just days after the president abruptly departed halfway through his visit with many other allies when he was in Canada as part of the G7 that was taking place there, the group of 7 leaders that were gathering together there. I'd want to give you some updates. We heard from the president moments ago. We are now hearing some of the reaction to the president's words, and among the concerns, obviously, right now for all Americans, certainly for this administration, is the potential for some form of retaliation. Moments ago, we just heard from Kristi Noem, of course, the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. She said, "We will work unceasingly to protect the American homeland." She writes, "Thank you, President Trump." Separately, we are hearing from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a leading Democrat right now, who is reacting strongly to the president's comments and saying, in effect, that his strikes today amount to grounds for impeachment. Let me read in part what we're hearing from her in the form of a statement saying the president's, in her words, disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution. And she says the congressional war powers. He has, in her words, impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. She adds, it is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. And then finally, separately, we are hearing from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, who writes in part, "Thank you, Donald Trump." And he adds, "Today, President Trump proved that never again is not just a slogan, it is a policy." Obviously, the idea of never again following the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews lost their lives, many across the Jewish community worldwide, and certainly in Israel, viewed Iran. Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has communicated this many times, that the Iranians' desire was to annihilate the Jewish state there, in effect, a repeat of the Holocaust. So that's the view as we are hearing from the Israelis. We will get more information specifically about what happened, perhaps a bit more of the TikTok as they can share it from the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is going to be speaking tomorrow morning alongside the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who joined the president, as we saw when he delivered those remarks earlier inside the residence here at the White House.
Peter Alexander at the White House, thank you so very much. And it's just a little bit past 10:30. As a matter of fact, it's 10:32 p.m. on the East Coast. It's 7:32 on the Pacific Coast. And if you're just joining us, we're following breaking news. President Trump addressing the nation moments ago after he said the United States bombed multiple nuclear sites inside Iran this evening. This is historic. It's the first time the U.S. has ever conducted a direct military attack on Iran. Obviously, the situation, the conflict between Iran and Israel is now have a completely different set of circumstances. This all began more than a week ago. The president calling it a spectacular military success and saying that they totally obliterated the nuclear sites, the 3 nuclear sites that were targeted. Here is his full 3-minute speech just moments ago.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
The President of the United States just about 30 minutes ago. I want to bring back Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker. Kristen, you're now going to be speaking to the Vice President tomorrow?
Jose, that's right. We do have an interview with Vice President J.D. Vance on Meet the Press tomorrow morning, and there are a number of questions clearly at the forefront in the wake of this monumental announcement and action by President Trump. What comes next? Of course, the world is bracing as Iran has warned for a counterattack. What will that look like? And then what will the United States response be to that? And then the big question for the administration as it relates to what we're hearing here in Washington, what's the reaction to lawmakers who are saying that President Trump needed congressional approval in order to take this step? You just heard my colleague Peter Alexander reading that tweet from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We have seen a number of other tweets that echo that throughout the night. Representative Tom Massey, a Republican of Kentucky, saying this is not constitutional. The ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes, saying, according to the Constitution, we are both sworn to defend. My attention to this matter comes before bombs fall, full stop. That is the sort of debate that will be unfolding on Capitol Hill. The counterpoint to that you are hearing from other Republicans and some Democrats is that this was a targeted strike. They will argue that Iran was too close to being able to develop a nuclear weapon, and therefore that justified this action. But then the question becomes, what is the specific intelligence that backs that up? Remember, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified before Congress in March that Iran was not moving toward developing a nuclear weapon. So did that intelligence change? Will the administration share those findings with Congress and with the American public? That looms very large over this. And again, you heard President Trump say that he is hoping that what will come next is Iran coming back to the negotiating table. But what will happen if we don't see that occur? Could this further ensnare the United States in a foreign war? Remember, President Trump ran on an America First foreign policy. This has really divided his base, which says this is counter to that. So we'll be watching for that debate as well, Jose.
Kristen Welker, thank you so very much. I want to bring back Richard Engel in Tel Aviv at this hour. Richard, we saw the President of the United States speak, and just moments before the President of the United States spoke, just over 30 minutes ago, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had a recorded message in English applauding the president of the United States.
He certainly did. The expectation was that we were going to hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu after President Trump spoke, but this recorded statement was released just shortly before he did, and it was a thank you. President Trump's name was mentioned repeatedly. I didn't count, but it may have been a half a dozen times or more that Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned President Trump's name in this very brief statement, thanking him for his resolve, thanking him for America's military might. And the key takeaway line, perhaps, was that how Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump talk about peace through strength, but that strength comes first and peace after that. We will see if this opens the door for peace or it just opens the door for a more protracted conflict, another open-ended conflict here in the Middle East. Israel is clearly concerned about a military retaliation. The Home Front Command has issued new guidance to the people of Israel, telling them to be more cautious, putting this country on a form of lockdown. So no schools, no work gatherings, no large public events, no entertainment. All of that has been suspended. Only essential work only, according to this new guidance.
Richard, I'm just going to ask you to dig into the vast pool of knowledge that you have and experience in the region, and specifically, of course, with Iran. The president of the United States saying there will be now peace or tragedy for Iran. That regime that has been in power since 1979 and that has seen the infrastructure of that regime be so deteriorated, especially in these last 7 to 8 days by Israel. What are they looking at? What do you think their options are, both private and public?
So this is a long battle that has gone on between the United States and Iran, Israel and Iran, that is now broken out into the open. It has now become a conventional war. But there was a war in the shadows. There is this animosity going back right to the foundation of Iran. When the Iranian Islamic Republic took over, the theocracy took over in 1979, and took over in part by taking American diplomats hostage at the embassy in Tehran. The two nations, America and Iran, began, or the new Iran after the Shah was overthrown, began as enemies, began as bitter enemies. And we're seeing some of that revenge, some of that sentiment still playing out right now. This well of animosity now coming to the surface. President Trump in his remarks talked about all the limbs that Iranian car bombs and roadside bombs caused. He's referring specifically to Iraq. When the United States invaded Iraq, became entangled in that country's civil war, unleashed that country's civil war, Iran intervened. Iran intervened so that it would have influence over Iraq. Iran started attacking American soldiers so that American soldiers would leave Iraq and not try and have regime change across the border in Iran. And many Americans were killed and injured by Iranian roadside bombs in Iraq after the U.S. intervened. So there was a lot of history, a lot of military action that has taken place covertly or on let's say, on a foreign field of battle. But now you have the U.S. intervening directly, attacking Iran directly, which is something it has not done since the hostages were taken, since Jimmy Carter tried to rescue those hostages and had a failed rescue attempt. This is a very different U.S. military response to Operation Eagle Claw that was launched to try and rescue the hostages, and which ultimately changed the course of American politics, probably cost the president the election.
And those hostages that weren't released for 444 days, released in January when President Ronald Reagan was swearing in Washington, D.C. I'm just wondering, Richard, there are so few strong proxies left for Iran in the region, in no small part because of Israel's deterioration of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. The United States has had a campaign against the Houthis recently. What are the other players that have been supporting Iran? And I'm thinking specifically Russia and China, not forgetting that Russia has been getting many of its drones, its armed drones, from Iran for its invasion in Ukraine.
So on a state level, Jose, probably no one is going to intervene to help Iran tonight. They don't have a NATO. They don't have those kind of alliances. Russia, Vladimir Putin is very happy to buy drones, depends on Iranian drones, has been using them to great effectiveness in Ukraine. China buys a lot of cheap oil from Iran and likes the fact that it has effectively cornered the Iranian market because so much of Iranian oil is sanctioned. The Iranian market is largely focused on sending its fuel to China because it has no other choice. It can't operate internationally in an open way. But those military and economic relationships are not profound enough that Russia or China are going to intervene militarily directly anyway. There have been reports that China or Russia could supply Iran with some weapons, but it seems unlikely that either one of them would risk a direct conflict over Iran. The regional powers, very unlikely. They have generally taken a position against Iran, particularly the Arab states. We're talking about Iran's ability to project power itself, and it still has some military capacity, although clearly less each day as Israel is carrying out these strikes, and now the U.S. is involved. And its militias are not what they used to be. Prime Minister Netanyahu has long wanted to do this operation. He wanted to do it after 9/11. He wanted to do it and each time there was a new president that he interacted with. He has been pushing this agenda. Time has come to attack Iran. He's given speeches in front of the UN. You can go back and see many times when Prime Minister Netanyahu has made the case that the world must intervene and must attack Iran and that the U.S. must get involved. He differed from the Mossad. He did with the Israeli intelligence agency, which at some stage said it wasn't necessary, it was too risky. He's been pushing this agenda for a long time and now had the ability to do it. He had a friend in President Trump who agreed, and Iran's proxies have already been effectively eliminated by several wars that Israel has launched since October 7th, coming up on 2 years this October.
No action possible. Words, of course. We're seeing some words already of support for Iran by its allies in this part of the world. And I'm thinking Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela that have been a strong supporter of Iran because Iran has been a strong supporter of those three dictatorships going back years. Richard Engel, thank you very much. We just got a new Truth Social post from President Trump, and I want to read it to you as you see it on your screen right there. It says, any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than was witnessed tonight. For more, let's bring in our NBC News Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube. Courtney, this is a very clear statement by the president that he expects no retaliation against the United States by the Iranian regime.
Yeah, candidly, Jose, I thought that would be a message that the president would have really hammered home in his statement less than an hour ago now. So it's interesting that only moments after he finished speaking from the White House, he put out a statement saying this. This is clearly an indication that there is this ongoing concern that Iran or Iranian proxy groups or networks are going to retaliate against the United States. And there are so many assets that are already there forward in the region. There's U.S. military. There's also diplomatic assets. But the U.S. military and the defense officials who I'm speaking with are particularly concerned about those bases there. The U.S. has moved additional personnel into the region in recent months. Now, a lot of that is defensive in nature, right? They've put additional ground-based interceptors in. There's more ships in the area. There's now 2 carrier strike groups in the CENTCOM area. Destroyers have moved in closer to Israel in recent days. That is for the defense of Israel. But they can also serve to defend Americans and American American assets in the region. In addition to that, the U.S. has brought in additional aircraft and fighter jets in recent days and weeks, and that is also so that they can shoot down incoming projectiles. Remember, the U.S. Air Force was pivotal when in one of these now numerous back and forth between Iran and Israel since October 7th, when the U.S. Air Force was up in the air shooting down multiple projectiles, a lot of drones that were coming from Iran launched towards Israel. Now, I suspect that message from President Trump is as much aimed at big Iran as it is at these proxy groups. There's a lot of concern about some of the smaller bases and where the U.S. has, a small number of troops in in Iraq and in Syria. They aren't as heavily fortified, and with so many of those proxy networks that really have freedom of movement and maneuver space around them, that is one of the big concerns. Now, Jose, I can also tell you we're learning a little bit more detail about what the U.S. did in Iran tonight. We know that those three sites were targeted, but we now know that a big part of that targeting effort was actually conducted by the United States Navy. U.S. submarines launched off about 30 Tomahawk missiles known as TLAMs. Those are launched from the submarines. They impacted at least two of those sites at Isfahan and at Natanz, Jose. Again, the president saying that these strikes completely and totally obliterated the sites, but we'll have to wait and see when daylight hits exactly how much damage was done there.
Courtney Kube, thank you so very much. I want to go back to our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. The president, Peter, said that some of his representatives were going to be speaking to the press as early as tomorrow.
That's right, Jose. We're told that we're going to hear from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Dan Kane will be speaking as well at about 8 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow morning, where we might get a bit more specifics about what took place. But I think what's important to note is what Courtney just reported there here on NBC, that the U.S., beyond those B-2 stealth bombers dropping those 30,000-pound bombs, a specific number that we still have not been able to identify. We know it was multiple bombs that were dropped. We now know that there were at least 30 Tomahawk missiles that were also fired from U.S. Navy vessels, apparently by submarines there. So to the point that we've been having throughout the course of this hour since the president spoke, when given a wide range of options, and it was communicated to me and our colleagues over the course of the last several days that all options remained on the table. Clearly, among the options, one would have been to exclusively focus on Fordo, which of course is that deep bunker of a nuclear enrichment site beneath a mountain there in the center of Iran, but that the president, as evidenced by the use of Tomahawk missiles beyond the B-2 bombers, has decided to go further than that, to focus on three separate nuclear targets here, delivering what they hope will be, in his words, a totally and completely obliterating blow to the nuclear program there. I should note that in my conversations here with multiple White House officials just before the president spoke, they told me that the president currently has no plans for additional strikes, but that now leaves open the question, as he has communicated in the form of that post a short time ago and in his remarks earlier, that if they do not see any movement toward peace going forward, if there is future retaliation, that the U.S. will go after Iran again, they said, with precision, speed, and skill. And he says this time it will be much easier, something they'll be able to do in just minutes, because so many of the defenses there in Iran have been defeated, knocked out by the Israeli Air Force over the course of the last several weeks. Again, I think of course, tonight is historic, it is significant and is monumental, and now the infighting will exist on both sides of the political aisle about whether this was constitutional and their views of it. Republicans and Democrats are largely divided there. But ultimately, I think the real way that the legacy will exist for this president is not just the decision to do this, but what the immediate days that follow and perhaps weeks and months that follow look like. And what form does the retaliation take? Is the U.S. Does this lead to peace, or does it lead to a protracted conflict? All things the president, through our conversations with national security officials and White House officials over the course of this week, had communicated to him by those advisors as they spoke to him over the week. In effect, he was told, as it was described to me, the pros and the cons, what the potential fallout would be of each potential scenario. And so now we have seen what the president has decided. Now we wait to see what Iran decides to do in response.
Peter Alexander at the White House, thank you so very much. I want to bring in retired U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey, NBC News military analyst. General, looking at this strictly from a military perspective, this was, to use the president's words, extremely successful.
Yeah, I think this was a bold and largely decisive attack to change the nuclear development equation inside Iran. Iran is greatly weakened, not just from the ongoing Israeli air attack on facilities throughout the country, but they're isolated. They have no allies. Their proxies have been largely destroyed or neutralized. I think it may well be an incentive to negotiate, certainly not tomorrow, but in the coming months. The only drawback to it that's obvious, it's a political disaster probably for the Trump administration, largely not supported by the American people, by the Democratic Party, by his own party. And I think it also tends to gloss over what the Iranians are going to do in the next 72 hours. It's hard for me to imagine there won't be a military response. Hopefully ineffectual, but you always got to worry about the golden BB striking a U.S. Navy warship at sea, catastrophic losses, in which case I think it will unleash the power of the U.S. Air Force and naval air and Tomahawk missiles on the Iranian nation.
That would be essentially, the reaction would be then essentially a de facto decapitation of the Iranian regime. General, the things have changed so much for Iran after the 7th of October, and you and I have had these conversations, for years now about the effectivity of the Israeli armed forces and its security and intelligence divisions when it's destroying much of Hezbollah with the walkie-talkies and the pagers to what they've done in Gaza, and they continue to do in Gaza. General, how much of that has permitted the United States to conclude this operation?
Well, I think the impact of intelligence in general, the U.S., of course, has a remarkable overhead systems, electronic intercept, a human capability. Israelis have a lot of native language speakers inside Iran. So the degree of penetration of the Iranian military and government is simply unbelievable. We also understood that they had mapped out pretty well with captured documents from a few years ago the state of development of the whole nuclear program. And I might add, although it's impossible to end the Iranian nuclear program, you can delay it by a year, a decade. And so my assumption is that's what's happened. We may have to strike it again. But the big question in my mind, Jose, is in the next 72 hours, how does Iran respond? They're weakened. We have 50,000 troops in the area. There are 2 carrier battle groups there now. A third has been told to deploy to the region. There's a lot of Air Force power in Saudi Arabia, the Gulf Coast states, Italy, the UK. Essentially, we're de facto at war with Iran for now.
General Barry McCaffrey, always a pleasure to speak with you. I thank you very much. Really appreciate it. That concludes this NBC News special report. Once again, recapping the President of the United States announcing just over an hour ago that the United States had successfully attacked and, according to the President, completely obliterated these 3 nuclear sites inside Iran. And one of those 3 sites has been a deep under a mountain site that has been extremely hardened with concrete and steel. According to our sources, the United States used those bunker busting bombs and possibly even the planes, the B-2s that are needed to transport those bombs. They had never been used. We're seeing that is the ordnance that was utilized in this one attack out of 3. The other ones were hit with Tomahawk missiles, more than 30 of them. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more breaking coverage right now on our streaming network, NBC News Now, and online at NBCnews.com. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you for the privilege of your time.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
Hello, this is special coverage from 7 News. I'm Michael Usher. We can report that Donald Trump has